So I ran a survey with the intention of trying to figure out, do Guilty Gear players hate playing Guilty Gear? And here's how I did it. I started by asking which floor people play at and which character they mainly play. This is important because it sets a mental bias in your brain to begin thinking about your experiences in the game. So if you're asked, do you like playing Guilty Gear? The immediate answer could be yes. But if you ask, do you like playing Guilty Gear on Ranked? The answers begin to vary. And this was just a tricky way of setting that up without being too obvious. The next question was asking which matchup they hated the most. This puts the applicant in a mental state of thinking about stuff they dislike about the game, which is then immediately followed by the question, is your character fair? This finally puts the applicant in the final mental state we needed them to be in for the final question. When you're asked if a character is fair or not, you begin to compare your character which you enjoy and a character you dislike. And now that your brain is considering things that you like and dislike, when you're asked why did you pick this character, it will give us a gauge on how you feel about the game. If you talk about how much you hate a character, it means that you have a pretty negative experience with the game. And if you talked about why you love the character, it means that you've had a pretty good experience with the game. I should be clear, that's like on average. The final question does one more thing as well, and that reveals what kind of player you are. Depending on the reason why you picked the character you like, you're either a heart, mind, or soul player. If you don't know what that means, there's a wonderful video that I'll link that goes deeper into it that's a lot better produced than whatever I create. I'm going to link all the data in the description below, and you all should go ahead and subscribe if you're interested in this kind of content. We're going to go alphabetically and start with Anji this time around. Anji's most disliked character was Happy Chaos, which is, yeah. The other interesting thing is that there are no mind players represented for Anji, which makes sense because if you're going for optimal, Anji isn't your character. Axel is next, and this one's pretty interesting. They were split on who they disliked between Giovanna and Milia, and they had an even split in almost every direction between heart, mind, and soul. But the person who had a negative response to why did you pick this character specifically targeted Kai. Baiken is next, and this one is also interesting. See, Baiken players had a specific anger, and that's towards Kai, though the candidate that responded negatively specifically mentioned Zato. Also, shout out to this guy who bought the game and DLC but never played it. Ship is pretty standard, mixed between heart, mind, and soul, didn't really specifically hate any specific character. Faust is what you would expect, a lot of heart players, and a strong dislike for Ramlethal. Geo is interesting because she doesn't really have any character that she specifically hates and has a pretty good mixture between heart, mind, and soul. The interesting part is that with the exception of one, everyone thinks that Giovanna is a fair character. Giovanna players are the most dishonest, proved by science. Gold Lewis strongly dislikes Nagoriyuki and is mostly heart players. Happy Chaos players are pretty honest, they all said that their character isn't fair, and a lot of them are heart players as well. Ino players specifically disliked Nagoriyuki more than anyone else, and there's a pretty good mixture between heart, mind, and soul. Though the most angered response comes from this person who really dislikes Baiken. Jacko players, who would have guessed, the most vanilla people out there, mixed between heart, mind, and soul, all believe their character is fair, no one that they really specifically hate, pretty average floor level. Just like your waifu, you're basic as fuck. Now, let's get to Kai. Kai players were pretty split between heart, mind, and soul, and disliked Ram and Chip. Though, it would be unwise of me to not mention that a majority of responses on why you play Kai talked about how much they hated Kai and were waiting for someone else. Kai players, are you doing alright? Leo players disliked Axel and had a pretty decent split between heart, mind, and soul. No real angered responses either. Except for this guy who tried to dox me, but is just wrong. Mei players disliked Kai and were mostly attached to the character rather than the technical side to her. Milia players are interesting. They hate playing against Axel, and Axel hates playing against Milia, which means that whenever they match, they instantly hate each other. Nago players are pretty honest with how unfair their character is, and they have a strong dislike for Happy Chaos. Potemkin players hate Kai, once again, and have a pretty decent mix between heart, mind, and soul, except for this guy who really fucking hated Ram. Ram players are pretty self-aware, saying that their character isn't fair, and a lot of people picked her up just because they liked her, so that's cool. Soul Bad Guy players on average didn't think their character was fair. In addition, they were split between disliking Baiken and Testament. Both characters that really forced you to play neutral, who would have guessed. Testament is next, and this one is interesting. It's interesting specifically because of the reasons that they wanted to pick Testament. Almost every single response was talking about how they enjoyed that Testament was non-binary like themselves, resulting in a lot of heart and soul players. Zato didn't really specifically hate anyone, and only one of them thought that their character was unfair. Let's go ahead and cover potential flaws as well as what we gathered from this information. The first flaw is in the sample I chose from. Because I asked my audience and I'm mostly a shitposter, it was bound to happen that a lot of the people who follow me are probably going to be heart players. The second flaw is that I may have not primed people enough to think about what they enjoyed and what we learned from the experience. Guilty Gear players like playing Guilty Gear because it's Guilty Gear. They have an attachment to the series and to the characters, and they enjoy playing them. As always, I've been Old Reliable, and thank you all for watching. Thanks to everyone who went ahead and took this survey. It was really interesting. Like in the matter of a few hours, I almost had like 200 responses or something like that, and it was really cool. Thanks to all the people who show up to Relly's stream, it's pretty cool. We're completely separate people, by the way. You know, me and that thing, yeah, no, we're not the same thing. We just both happen to enjoy Erica, that's it. I've got some stuff coming down the pipeline. I've re-scripted a Chaz Princeton video for like 4 times now, and I'm beginning to work on developing a Why You Should Play Faust video. So go ahead and subscribe if you want to see that, or don't. It doesn't really matter.